And without further ado, I do want to invite Yaniv. Yaniv is a very dear and close friend. He's security professional. I know him for 15 years when I've started security, so he's well known also in Israel and abroad. Today he's working in Pagaya. He's the CISO over there, leading the global CISO, the global security in the company. So Yaniv, the stage is all yours.
Thanks, Leo, and thank you, everyone. And I'm a bit blushing now, but and you already told everyone our age, so it's not that good. But we'll try to take it into a more of a light session with everyone. Sagi, thank you for a brilliant session, much more interesting than I do. I'll try my best here. As Leo mentioned, I joined Pagaya around 7 months ago. I'm now leading the information security. For some reason, I'm also leading the IT and business application. I don't know why, but anyway, we're trying our best here. The main idea of this session is to really talk about data protection and how it comes to life when having or dealing with an organization that utilize both SaaS application and obviously an IaaS infrastructure. And I think a lot of the organizations that don't have hybrid type of approach, or maybe kind of like a very go to the cloud type of approach, are struggling with a lot of issues. Not that I'm disrespecting the hybrid approach. It makes you think about what are your actual challenges and what needs to be done in order to protect them. And what I'm about to explain and share with you is mostly around my thoughts and what we are trying to do here. Leo, can you just give me the control? I'm not able to switch the, oh, there you go.
Yes, you have it.
Thank you. Trying to share with you a bit about my mindset. And this is really a lot about thoughts. And I'm not going to talk about technology too much because I think there are much more smarter guys in the room or in general from me that can talk about technology. And it's interestingly enough, but you can see a big or maybe even a huge hype in companies today that are dealing with data protection and data security. And this is for a just reason. The data today is becoming kind of like the fuel that mobilize everything here in many companies, not necessarily companies that are dealing with PII or financial information or credit cards, but a lot of companies that are dealing on the day-to-day operations, they are also very much struggling to protect their data. So we're going to try to give an ecosystem a brief about how we think and how we are trying to do that in Pagaya. Feel free to ask any question, Einat, please do. And the main idea behind it is to kind of like give you a bit of a glimpse about how we try to do it here. A bit about Pagaya, I'm not sure that everyone are aware of it. Pagaya is a company based in Tel Aviv and New York, around 800 employees already, about to become public very soon. And the main idea behind Pagaya is, this is where it's becoming very interesting, because from one hand, we have the financial side of Pagaya really acting like a bank, capital markets and client advisory and funds and everything around that. But from the other way around, a very technological company that deals with data research, AI. And the main idea behind Pagaya is to take better decision for financial organization in the way of AI to allow ourselves to provide them with solution, decision-making around the credit, real estate, and insurance company. Long story short, for those who I even don't know sometimes myself how I'm explaining that, but in a very, very short sentence, there is a partner out there in the US that is giving credit to different consumers, and it is based on a credit score. If the consumer doesn't have a good credit score, he usually being declined. Pagaya said something else. Let us get all of the features, and now you understand that we also get a lot of sensitive information. We will run it for our AI machine. If we think he is solid fit to get a credit, we will not just approve it, we will actually provide the funds for it. This is why it makes us act like a bank and meet different regulation and requirements. So this is kind of like a very high level note, and that actually leads us to what we are doing in other domains. And not too much about myself, doing security for a long time. I think what is interesting in my background and history is that this is the first time that I'm working in a company that is considered to some degree a startup. I usually came from bigger enterprises. I dealt with a lot of things around also data security, but the first time that I'm really focused on a company that is a bit younger, much more agile, in the way that it wants to work, and the entire ecosystem is completely different, and I think some of you will relate to that. So without further ado, let's start. You know, you are all familiar with data. information is beautiful. This is a website. This is not me creating that. I'm not that talented. The main idea behind that is you can see many data hacks and what is happening around, and usually in the world itself, how many data records are being sent out, because we all understand that data is the new fuel, or how I like to better say is the new currency. And you know, when you think about it, and I did some research with a company here, even in Pagaya, and some of you might not agree, but for those who do not know, and this is based on my knowledge and assumptions here, and actually facts, if you have a ransom attack today that is involving a data leakage instead of a crypto, meaning that you're not blocked, but simply being exfiltrated with data, God forbid, like we know from Shearbit and other places, this is actually much, much, much higher than having your entire stack encrypted. The cost of it, the implication of it, I think some of you might say, oh, obviously, but not everyone think that, because many are thinking, oh my God, my laptop is locked, my data center on the cloud is currently encrypted. Oh my God, this is the worst thing that could ever happen. No. The worst thing that could ever happen to you is that if your data is being leaked outside, if your data is manipulated, and if your data is exfiltrated, whether it's a broken business or whether it's a de facto event that happened to you. And this is something that everyone are very much intimidated. This is why we see the hype today around data, new companies, new consultants thinking about that and working on that. And this is kind of like where we are all very much going to. And as I said, it's not necessarily means that you need to have personal identifiable information or financial information. You can also kind of like make sure that you need to keep your own data itself. So kind of like a bit about the starting point. This is where I wanted to be a bit interactive. I know that not everyone wants to raise questions, but if you think and want to, please go ahead. But from my point of view, the starting point when I joined Pagaya was to really understand what are your threats. Don't run. Don't try to understand what are your threats de facto. What are the solutions that you want to do, and what are the technical measures that you want to implement. The main idea is to really identify the threats that exist in your organization. So one can come and say in a very easy way, of course, data exfiltration, that's the worst thing that could happen. Could be, probably. But what about data manipulation? You have a model, a credit model, in our case, that someone can manipulate, and that changes the way you provide credit to different consumers. Pagaya recently provided more than 1 million credits to American consumers. What if something actually can go wrong there? If someone changed it, now you give credits to people that don't have a solid background. What about actually touching the data? This data is federated, meaning secured or protected by federal requirements or other things like that. That is also a big issue. So it could be kind of like a very easy step for everyone, but I'm saying put some thought into that, work with your stakeholders, try to understand what are your problems. And I think that everyone really understands that, and this is my focus here on the discussion, because I can go ahead and say, just encrypt everything, put some great data leakage, do some access control, and you're gonna be fine. That's not the case. I think everyone understands that today, and I hope that everyone understands that. If not, I'll happy to share a bit more offline around my thoughts. But to me, in every data protection program, data discovery is the most important part. Because if you don't know what you need to protect and where your data resides, you are actually shooting in the dark. You think you put some DLP on your email, and then you realize that you have an API from your Snowflake that actually takes all of the information out. You weren't even aware of that. And there's so many examples that I can share. What I'm trying to say, long story short, work with the stakeholders, try to understand how to discover your data, where that data resides, and I'll give more examples. And actually from there, start understanding how your data flow works. And I'm also going to give a brief about that. Okay, so you did a discovery, you know what your threats are, everything is cool. Let's run and do some technology, right? I think so in many of the cases, because not everything needs to be actually work kind of like step A, step B, step C. Some things needs to be in parallel. But before having the first two items, then you can actually start running to the third one. But also very important, and I emphasize that throughout the different things that I'm raising here, you cannot walk alone. You need to make sure that you have relevant partners in the process. It could be compliance, it could be legal, it could be data. By the way, many companies today have data groups that are responsible for the data, make sure that you work with them, make sure that you sync and align with them to really understand how your data flow looks like. It's not the traditional world that we talked about it 15 years ago, when it was very simple. I have data, it needs to be on a server, let's make sure that it's not being downloaded. The ecosystem today is completely scattered. It's much more amorphic. This is why zero trust and any other idea is coming into life, but not necessarily zero trust around data protection, more around access and control. But what about data? And that is something that, if any kind of like inventor or someone that wants to build a company around that, take the idea of zero trust, put it into the data approach, and then you have already a seed funded. Just think about the best idea for you. But these are the type of things that people need to pay attention to. And start rolling. And let's start rolling, because I'm bullshitting you too much and giving kind of like a framework about how data protection in mindset should kind of like start. And again, this is my idea. I'm not saying that this is the right way to go. And I think that one of the key items today, and one of the key conflicts that we have, is that we don't even know how to call it. Some call it data protection, some call it data security, some call it working in verticals, and something that, DLP is different than access control, it's different than encryption, and so on and so on, and how everything in the taxonomy works. So before we move forward, Lior, is it okay to ask the question that is being raised and answer it? Do you allow me?
Yes, of course. Do you want to raise a pool?
A pool? What do you mean a pool?
Yes, a pool in the Zoom. We can ask questions and people can answer, like clicking.
Okay, no, I think I'll just read Kobe, and then we can move at the end to the pool, if that is okay. So Kobe, hi Kobe, how you identify your end user, and how are you protecting your supply chain and third parties in the cloud? So you asked 5 questions here, Kobe, but I'll try to answer all of them. So in general, identify your end users. We'll go into that. I think that everyone that is trying to access your data repos today, whatever they are residing, whether it's on SaaS or cloud, first of all, needs to go for an IDE. You cannot permit any local users to be managed there. And if you control your data repo after you discover them, by the way, you need to make sure that your ID, it could be an Okta, Azure Active Directory, whatever the case is, okay? Make sure that they are provisioned via a centralized identity management system. How you're protecting your supply chain, big word, supply chain, depending on how you define it, and third parties in the cloud. So depending on where you look at it, from where you look at it, I'll try to kind of like give my best, and Kobe, sharpen your question if I'm not touching your relevant point. So, by the way, I will give some explanations about that. But in general, you need to control who is accessing, because if you look at my chart here, the 5 silos, this is how kind of like my bread and butter. First of all, discovery, learn your ecosystem, make sure that you continuously assess. You have an S3 bucket. You know that you have PII there. Okay, you protected it. Does it still have PII? What about the bucket that you know that there is no PII there? You continue to scan it, because tomorrow it could hold a PII data in it. How do you continuously assess and make sure that you understand that? Now, you know where your technical asset resides, or your data assets. How do you combine it with the overall data flow? Okay, you want to make sure that you understand how this fits into the overall picture. You get an API call. Okay, now I'm getting technical. I'm kind of like exciting myself. I don't really know what I'm talking about. I'll try my best. You're getting an API call. You're getting data into that. It's going into the application. Then it's going into an S3 bucket. And then maybe it's being replicated to an S3 databases. Okay, this is a technical flow. But how does that relate into a business flow? That means a consumer requested a credit. That credit populates into your system. It is being evaluated. You keep the data for a specific set of logs. You need to understand how everything works in the flow to make sure whether the data is going into the right location, who are the relevant consumers of it, and what type of controls you need to do. And this is relating to the supply chain. Understand how the supply chain works from a technical point of view and from a system point of view, a flow point of view. Generate the hierarchy and accountability. We'll talk about that. Go to the access control. Yeah, very easy. 15 years ago, least privilege approach, very easy to say, not very easy to actually live by, because what the hell is access today? Is it interactive access? It's an API access? How many of you really know how many APIs are connected to your different SaaS solution and actually taking information out? How many of you really can come and say to yourself, you don't need to say it here, because I'm not sure that I do that in the best manner. How many APIs are connected to your data warehouse today? And what type of information is being pulled out? Because everyone are trying to go to the easiest part and say, oh, Yaniv is accessing that Snowflake, for instance, so I don't know, whatever, MongoDB, and yeah, I can control him, I know what he does. That's not really the approach. Monitoring the access, of course, periodic access review, and as I said, not focused on humans only. And obviously, from an access control, people tend to think that they did periodic access review, they did access control, everything is amazing, segregation of duties, blah, blah, blah. But what about stale access? Does he really continue to access? He maybe need it. Does he de facto goes there? Whether it's an API, whether it's a human, okay? Encryption. Okay, we don't have a lot of time, so I'll try to kind of like give my best here. You know, not everyone goes into this encryption point of view. I think encryption is a big, very strong word to say, and not very easy to assume. There are great companies today in the world. I cannot expose names because I don't think it's ethical, but you need to understand that encryption also has a lot of terminology in it. There is a very big difference between tokenization and anonymization. It also relates to retention of data and how you keep that data in place. And it's not very easy. Yeah, not a problem on encrypted data. What does it mean you encrypt the data? It's not that easy. How do you maintain the keys? And then I'm going to go technical. But I think encryption as an overall view around data security as part of the big data protection plan is critical. And now you come and maybe kind of like raise an eyebrow and say, oh, prevent exfiltration, but I already encrypted that according to your approach. Why do I need to prevent exfiltration? Because like we said 15 years ago, security is based on layers. And even if you forgot something that you did not discover, you did not encrypt, maybe the exfiltration itself will help you. But moreover, even if your data is being pulled out by an insider or an external threat, even if it's encrypted, you still have reputational damage. You need to pay attention to that. And you cannot encrypt everything, okay? And here comes the big question. I encrypted my email. We use Zix, I don't know, some weird American solution. Very good, by the way, very strong one. And then I came and raised the question, oh, great, I encrypted to one of my partners, but I sent him PII. Is that okay? That's the way to do it? Shouldn't I have kind of like hash the relevant fields or remove them? So the traffic itself is encrypted. Is that good enough? Should I have prevented it? A lot of questions, by the way, that I don't have answers for everything, but definitely I can tell you that exfiltration today, what we call DLP as an approach, is also becoming very big, but not in the legacy mindset. It needs to go into the next generation. And there is no solid solution. Probably someone will jump on me. I'll be happy to learn, by the way. I don't think there is a really good solution today for DLP on cloud that can identify all of the different assets. And that leads me to the next slide. But just kind of like a mindset, and this is where a lot of the hype is going towards startups today. Think about having a Orca, Wiz.io, CSPM type, very good companies today in the world doing something else. Think that you had a posture management, a data posture management that is actually doing and containing all of these four, but really is focused on this discovery. So if we start from a monitoring point of view and then move to a prevention, that is also okay. I'm not saying let's wait for the organization. Maybe try to think about something and build something on your own using your, I don't know, SIEM, BI, whatever you want to use, elastic type of approach in your organization. How cool would that be? So moving forward, if I'll be able to move forward and show you that I think I know and talk about real examples and not just give a high-level view. From my point of view, there are 5 main critical items. The first of all, as I said, discover. Now, I just talked about it, so why am I talking about it again? Because I want to imagine that not everyone, including myself, that was not aware, and I came from an organization that had to manage 60,000 servers, so I know a thing or two about managing protection in big scale. I came from an organization that has hundreds of servers, and then it blew my mind. So many SaaS type of solutions, and I'm just giving here maybe 5% of what we use today in Pagaya. Okay, so many items, so many type of data assets that you do not do a proper discovery, you have no idea what you need to protect on. So it starts from your relevant EFS on AWS, if you, God forbid, use that, okay? Or you put it on EC2 or an EMR and you run some sort of a code on it, not talking about EKS and things like that. And then you actually use a lot of the S3 buckets. But what about the services, Mongo, Snowflake, Databricks for data pipeline? If you don't know what you need to protect, how can you actually protect? And I think that this is a very key item around that. And as I said, I will focus a lot on the discovery. If you look at point 2, 3, and 4, the idea is to really create a data flow. And I'll give you an example of a data flow and how I see that in the next slide to some degree. But what am I trying to say out of it? If you don't have a data flow, you have no idea what needs to be protected and what system are actually running it. Because discovery is not just a technical point of view. Discovery is also understanding from the business point of view what actually is being involved. And then you realize that you have a big shadow ID in your organization and you have so many solutions that you're not even aware of them. And here comes the big word that a lot of CISOs and information security managers don't like to use because it kind of like takes them back. But unfortunately, it is critical. Whatever type of taxonomy you want to use whatever you want, but make sure that you have a business data owner, you have a technical application owner. Understand what stewards are. I don't know if you know what stewards, and I think you know what stewards are in general taxonomy, but with regards to data, stewards are the ones that are consuming the information. Why are they consuming the information? How do they do that? Do you have a steward that is responsible for the compliance and approval of access? And what about custodian? Who is actually responsible for protecting that information? It's not just the CISO, the information security team, or the data team. Whatever taxonomy you use, think about this type of approach. You need to have a data owner, the one that are actually consume that data, the one that are responsible to maintain, protect, and actually even fix that type of data, because they will be a very major part in your overall process. And data catalog, I don't know what you start with. It's a spreadsheet. It's a big application that costs you $200,000. It doesn't matter. Document management in the right sense. Lastly, and this is also important, you know, if you don't understand what their compliance requirements are as a CISO, even if you work with legal, but you're saying, it's not responsible, it's not under me, you're wrong. You need to understand what are your compliance, what are your legal obligation, and actually focus on them. Whether you're focused on the US side, and then you realize you have CCPA, FCRA, and GLBA. I just learned it. I have no clue what it means. I'm just trying to see if I can like able to funny. Thank you, Leo. No, I'm just kidding. I think I know what it is, and everyone really knows what GDPR is, but probably no one ever read that. And there are so many regulations. Go to the eastern side of the world. Did you know that there is a GDPR for Philippines, for Malaysia? Doesn't matter where you are working on. Try to understand your compliance landscape. This is how it looks like, boring as hell. Okay, but if you try to map and build some sort of a structure that talks about the data management from an R&R perspective, from a data flow perspective, it makes much more sense. You're starting to build the boxes. It will take you forever, yes. So I don't know, hire someone or try to bring someone that really understands about that. And then suddenly it's like a puff. The tunnel is being opened. You see the light at the end of the tunnel. You're not just protecting specific ad hoc data assets or a data lake. You're really understanding the full grasp of what is actually happening there, and you can really protect it end to end and go to sleep thinking that you might did something in the best manner possible. And by the way, I'm not saying that you need to stop your day-to-day, start discovering, start mapping, starting to build that. Something needs to be in parallel. When I came here, yes, I'm kind of like destroying my entire idea here. The first thing that I did, I installed a DLP. Yeah, because I don't know, you need to, right? But now I'm optimizing it. Now it's actually relating to the data flows that I'm doing. Now I'm starting to provision access to the cloud via Okta. I'm starting to build access controls. So I'm not saying everything is step A, step B. Something needs to be in parallel. And before Leo will kill me, I'll try to close this type. You know, I hope you're kind of like listening and I didn't get you too much bored, but when you think about it, the threats and consideration, I try to kind of like give some examples. So definitely, when you think about why data protection today is completely different than what you used to have when we had a local data center, and it's quite funny because I think that today, and again, this is my 2 cents, protecting your data assets on cloud is much more easier comparing to having a local database, a local data center. I know it sounds weird, but even weirder now is that I think that when you have a local data center, the data protection is easier than having it on the cloud. So it's kind of like a complete 180 degree. From my point of view, some would argue, and this is at least my 2 cents. What are the threats that I'm thinking about here? Data exfiltration, unauthorized access, insider threat, unmanaged and ungoverned access, retention violation. Think about it. You have data that is not compliant with retention policy. Big problem. Security posture. Why is that important? Because if your buckets are not encrypted and your assets are exposed externally, then you're actually exposure for data protection violation or something bad will happen is increasing by the dozens. Data manipulation, not people really paying attention to that, but if I'm changing something in my organization, and it's kind of like the traditional theme that you used to have, file integrity monitor, never got this tool running ever, but the idea is simple, okay? Who is changing something? Why did he change it? And what can that apply to me? Think about whether you have an asset like that in your organization that can really create a big headache. It doesn't even have to contain any PII. Shadow IT, if you don't know what your IT is and where you are actually storing your data assets, how can you protect that and make sure that you have proper data protection? Overprivileged APIs, if you don't know what are your APIs and what they contain, how they work, you have a big problem. DevOps, make them your friends. We have a very strong DevOps team here at Pagaya and great friends. I couldn't do half of the thing I'm doing without them, but DevOps are running much more faster, much more faster than security teams. Try to collab with them, try to create principle that will allow you to better create, approach to data security and data protection, whatever you want to call it, and stale data. How do you protect against it? Now it's going to look like the rain that is running now in Israel. So, permission and access, this is kind of like I try to brainstorm everything that I could. Data leakage prevention, yes, it's still very relevant, not always easy to implement. Tokenization, encryption, anonymization, whatever. We just try to understand that there are big differences behind all of these, okay? It's not just that easy. Data security posture, if you do not govern it, if you don't have this portal, when you can see everything, you're in a big problem. So try go there. And soon you'll probably have kind of like a vendor doing it for you because I met like 6 of them. Periodic access control view, still very critical for data protection. Secure posture. And then it's actually becoming much more hectic. And you can get some great ideas. I think that 2 ideas that are very much relevant are actually on the right side of the map. Third-party access to your data, whether it's vendors, outsource people that are working for you, or APIs, or companies. Sagi talked about Slack. How many of you that use Slack know which APIs are connected to your Slack? And what are they doing there? I didn't know that a month ago. Okay, now hopefully I think I know, but how many thought about that? Okay, and Slack is a big way to exfiltrate data. Okay, in a very easy way, especially if it's open outside. Okay, and data transfer, how data transfer is done in a very good way, in a secure way, but don't just have a cyber vault. Make sure that the cyber vault is connected to some way to a data protection system. And just lastly, and then here is where I kill you completely, and I'll be done with it. We talked about discover, access, tokenization, encryption, whatever, and data exfiltration. But keep in mind, data is not lived by security people. Data is based on a complete data lifecycle. And this is what I was trying to say throughout the entire focus. If you don't understand the data lifecycle, from collection, storage, usage, up to retention, archival, whatever the name is, you get me? You cannot understand what security needs to be done. But it doesn't matter how you look at it, from here or from here. You need to be able to look at it from both sides and match it. And if you don't understand the principle of data lifecycle, you definitely cannot do a data protection, data discovery in place. And you have this slide, you can use it whatever you want. We paid a lot of money for many people to make it. So you can use it, but you can see actually a lot of examples coming from here and how we divide it between discover, classify, data security, monitor, and enforcement. Okay, headache is gone. Questions? If we have, if Leo permits.
Wow, Yaniv, what a lecture. Wow, wow. There is a question by Einat Shimone, I think. What is your approach, Yaniv, for data lake? You talked about it in a glimpse, so if you can elaborate on that.
I think that in general, data lake. Hi, Einat. Data lake is a very interesting topic because I think in general, the understanding of data lake is to start from what type of data is actually being stored there. But the same approach applies here. The same approach, it's nothing different. Discover, access. And by the way, the discover is critical for the flow within the data lake. That's why I said it's so important. Discover, access, encrypt, and data leakage. I think this is critical. One item, by the way, that I would add here, that I didn't add, is how you consume data from your data lake. Okay, a lot of people tend to think that you can access your data assets on the cloud, and then you realize that they download it to your endpoint to other places, and that's kind of like bad. Okay, so one of the items that I would add on top of everything that I kind of like try to put into 30-minute slide is to really understand how they consume the data. Okay, and this is why it's so critical. Call it them stewards, whatever you want to call them. Try to understand how to consume them, because then you realize that you also have a gap coming from there. Okay, they run some, I don't know, I forgot the name of it. Never mind. Some shit. They run some code on an EMR within AWS, and then you realize, oh, they can download it. Oh, that's bad. It holds PII. Why do they download it from an endpoint or wherever they connect it to? So this is where I think data lake is the only missing piece, the only missing piece in that from whatever I just described here.
Okay, we have another question coming from Josh. Should data integrity restore testing be applied to SaaS data? So should
data integrity restore testing be applied to SaaS data? I must say, Josh, I'm not fully understand the question.
Yes.
I apologize.
Yes,
I'll
just
be happy to answer.
if you can clarify, yes, if you can clarify just the question, what exactly are you meaning by that?
Any more? What are your 2 cents for data leakage on zero trust environments? Thank you, Zvi, for getting things complicated. So zero trust, let's think about it. What is zero trust? It's the idea of that you're able to kind of like be agnostic to wherever information is coming from or whatever access is coming from, and actually make sure that you know who it is, you record it or audit it, and any abnormal behavior. It's principle of architecture, and you're able to actually make sure that you have proper authorization. So think that if we could apply data related principles into a zero trust type of approach, that could be amazing. What does it mean? That every type of information that will be sent out of my boundaries will be actually not enabled and have to go through some sort of a gateway. There are 2 companies today in the world, I cannot say their names. One of them, by the way, no, I cannot say that. It's going to sound weird. There are 2 companies, if you want offline, I'll be able to talk with you. They actually apply from a technical point of view, the measure of zero trust in data. They're saying the following: data cannot leave your organization without actually going through specific gateway. And it's not the idea of digital right management, DRM, or something like that. It's more of the idea that you define boundaries with you and your partners, and you make sure where that is actually being able to be sent and actually how it can be consumed. Now, I don't think it's a very mature approach yet, but definitely in the right direction. And this is what I would add into zero trust type of approach.
Okay, thank you very much, Yaniv. It was a very good lecture, and you gave us the wide range of understanding the risk on the cloud and SaaS. Guys, if you have any further questions, we will answer those in the end of the meetup. So Yaniv and all the lecturers will stay to answer your question, but I will want to keep up time. So thank you very much, Yaniv, for that.